Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the introduction to 19.3. My name is Brooke McGee, and I am the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at GridSmart. I will be moderating today's webinar, so if you have any questions, please wait until the end of our presentation when we open up the floor for a Q&A. Today we have Jeff Price, GridSmart Vice President of Technology, who will be introducing the new and improved features of 19.3. Jeff, we'll go ahead and let you begin.
Hi, everyone. As Brooke said, this is Jeff Price. I'm the GridSmart VP of Technology, and I'm going to introduce just a few of the things in GridSmart 19.3 that was just released. Really appreciate you all taking the time to learn some more about GridSmart and what we're doing. Again, GridSmart 19.3, the release came out about a week ago. Hopefully, you've had the time to read the changelog. If you haven't, highly encourage you to visit support.gridsmart.com. You can do this without a registered account. You can see the changelog, and you can go see the 19.3 changelog, and it is a long list of new features, improvements, and fixes. So make sure you've read through that and you understand what's going on. One thing I want to mention, despite the long list that you're seeing, there's a much longer list behind the scenes as GridSmart takes a big step into its future. And what I'm talking about there is the continued performance and stability and security improvements behind the scenes so that we can continue to deliver great new functionality on the GS2 hardware. Now, despite the long list, today I'm primarily going to focus on the very first bullet on that changelog. And that's what the bulk of this presentation will be about. And what that is the new feature for bicyclist discrimination in the box to enable green extension for bikes. This new feature is available with Performance Plus module, and we're pretty excited about it. We've been working on it for a little while, and we're really glad to get it into your hands and hear what you have to say about it. So with that, I'm gonna jump right into bikes in the box. So what GridSmart has done with bicyclists is a little different than what's been in the market today. So as I mentioned, this is part of the Performance Plus module. And when we compare bikes in the box versus stop line discrimination, which is the standard in the market today, what GridSmart is achieving with bikes in the box is improved safety and improved efficiency. And I think that's kind of special to state again. It's not just more efficient, it's also safer. So one of the things you'll see me highlight as I go through this presentation is the concept of safety first, but the way that GridSmart has approached this problem allows us to achieve safety first and efficiency by default. So how you set up bikes in the box is really, it couldn't be simpler to set up or to understand. Three-step process: draw the box, just like you've drawn any other zones, define the outputs, and publish the changes. And let me walk you through what that looks like. So I'm going to click into an intersection. I'm going to go to the configure screen. I'm going to switch to flattened view. I'm going to click the new icon in the top left corner next to vehicle zone. It says box. And when I click on the box, it's going to tell me how to draw it. It's just the same old GridSmart, draw the box. So you see me draw the box, close it off. That's actually it. The only thing that you have from a box are extension outputs. Now you can have extension outputs for bikes or vehicles. In this scenario, I'm programming outputs simply for bikes. So the note there is that in the box, we discriminate a bicyclist from a different vehicle. Now, I'm also walking through the publish workflow here. One of the changes in 19.3 is a slightly modified publish workflow where you're going to have to authenticate with a username and a password. So we authenticate and publish those changes. And that is literally it to setting up the box for bicyclist discrimination. So what I want to show you next is a little bit about how that works. So what we have here is an intersection, one of our many test intersections. And we've got some vehicle zones, and we have a box in the center. So as you'll see, as the vehicles, motorized vehicles, pass through this box, there's no activation. It's programmed with bicyclist outputs only. There's a bicyclist approaches. As he enters the box, we trigger the box for bicyclist outputs. So again, vehicles passing through the box aren't triggering an activation because there are no vehicle outputs, but a bicyclist traveling through the box does trigger outputs. Let's get another one of our test intersections. And in this scenario, we've got vehicles traveling through the box. Waiting at the red in the top left is an entire platoon of bicyclists, and you'll see as they enter the box, we start making calls for bicyclists. When this platoon of bicyclists has traversed the box, we will drop those calls, meaning there's no more bicyclists in the box. And as vehicles pass through, again, no calls for vehicles. Now you could program it to have calls for vehicles if you like. We expect most of you will be using the bicyclist extensions only. Continuing on, another example of an operating intersection. The bottom of this screen is very hard to see. There's two bicyclists waiting for the light to change green, which it just did. As these two bicyclists enter the box, we see the box activate. When they leave, the activation stops because there's no more bicyclists in the box. One of the things I wanted to note, I'm going to roll back that video a little bit. This will become important a little later. Those two bicyclists left the stop line at the same time. And what you can see is one is clearing the box now. One is not quite halfway through the box. This sort of highlights the fact that bicyclists travel at different speeds. So those guys clear the box. And now we have a new green coming up on the top right of the screen. We have a couple of bicyclists leaving this zone up here, entering the box, triggering, again, bike extensions from the box. And then lastly, coming from the bottom, we have a bicyclist running the red light, also triggering an extension in the box while he traverses it until he is out of the box. And then the last example I want to show you of this operating. In this scene, there's a bicyclist, very small, hard to see, where I'm moving the mouse. He's stopped in the box, and approaching from the bottom right corner is another bicyclist traveling at fairly high speed. And this is again an example of bicyclists traveling at different speeds. And one thing I'll come back to in a second, maybe a little hard to see, but both of those bicyclists actually cleared the box on an all red. So they didn't need any green time to clear the box. So what's going on behind the scenes, just as a little clue to what we're doing behind the scenes, is GridSmart is a tracking system. We detect and track all the moving objects in the scene. What we're doing with bicyclists and some other vulnerable road users is every object we're tracking, we're actually, as it approaches the junction box where conflicts can occur, we're running a machine learning algorithm on that to classify what type of object that is. So to give you an example, in this case, this is the video with the slow bicyclist waiting for the light to change. And as he starts to move, let me come back to that. So this cyclist starts to move. You see a yellow dot. The yellow dot gets a black dot. Again, another cyclist, yellow dot and a black dot. We're looking at that and we're saying, the yellow dot is saying there's a possible bicyclist or vulnerable road user. And then the black dot says, we've decided after looking at this for several frames and making several decisions that that is certainly a bicyclist or a vulnerable road user. To give you another example of how this operates, this is a little more involved activity. What we're going to see is there's a jogger enter the box, a pedestrian behind, two bicyclists, and then a third bicyclist making a left turn. So again, you can see how we're identifying, and we're just sort of annotating this video for display purposes to show you how we can identify vulnerable road users like bicyclists, particularly bicyclists, from other motorized traffic. Now, why do we want to do this in the box? And there's two reasons, and I kind of hinted at them earlier. Safety first, efficiency by default. So let's talk a little bit about safety. what if stop line discrimination is not 100% accurate? Now, I'm not commenting on the accuracy of it. I'm just asking the question, what if stop line discrimination is not 100% accurate? In that scenario, a false byte call, or what we call false positive in machine learning, at the stop line means that you have to serve a long minimum green for something that didn't need it, which is a dramatic loss of efficiency. And you have no opportunity to recover because you can only see the stop line. So that's the impact of a false byte call. On the other hand, with stop line discrimination, with a missed byte call, it's dangerous because cyclists have been trained to expect the long minimum green that you've previously been serving them. And you also, again, have no opportunity to recover from that mistake, as once they leave the stop line in the field of view, you don't know what happens in the intersection. Now, on the other hand, in the box, a false byte call has an impact on efficiency, but it's significantly less because we can create only a short extension. Since the impact on efficiency is less dramatic, we can err on the side of safety. So to dramatically reduce and ideally eliminate any missed bikes. So we can do this much more accurate capture and detection of bicyclists in the box and still be more efficient. So that's the safety first approach. Always err on the side of safety. And what I mean by efficiency by default, when we're considering bicyclists in the intersection, what we look at with a California MUTCD, for example, is clearance time, or the clearance interval. That clearance interval is about the box. It's the time that it takes a bicyclist to travel from the stop line to the farthest side of a conflicting lane. So stop line discrimination assumes all bicyclists travel the same speed. It's kind of a slowest common denominator. So even if stop line discrimination is 100% accurate, it still wastes green time because not all bicyclists, in fact, the majority of bicyclists travel faster than that slowest common denominator. So to highlight those points, I want to use some illustrative examples. And the first thing I want to note is a formula, and this is from the California MUTCD. This is, on the left is the clearance interval. So the minimum green plus yellow plus red clearance. That clearance interval for bicyclists by the California MUTCD is required to be greater than or equal to 6 seconds, which is considered to be the bike startup loss, how long it takes the cyclist to get going. And it's plus a distance divided by a speed. And that distance is the distance from the stop line to the far side of the last conflicting lane, plus 6 feet for the length of a bicycle, divided by some speed, 14.7 feet per second, which is considered to be an average speed that a bicyclist will achieve from a stop line through the intersection. So that's the formula to compute the clearance interval according to the California MUTCD. So let's take that formula and apply it to a couple of intersections and see what that means. In this test intersection, you can see we have a bicyclist stopped past the stop line, ready to cross the intersection. This is an 86-foot traverse. According to the MUTCD, that should take 12.3 seconds. When this light turns green and the cyclist starts across the intersection, he actually clears that intersection in 7.9 seconds. So 35% faster than the MUTCD. Let's look at another location. So this is back to the slow and the fast bicyclist I talked about before. The MUTCD says 12.9 seconds. We have a slow bike. We have a fast bike who never slows down. The first guy is 8.8 seconds, which is 32% faster than the MUTCD. And the second bike who timed his traverse was only 4.8 seconds. And the interesting thing in this scenario was they both exited and cleared the box on all red. This was from a long ped cycle, but it still highlights the fact that unless you can see the box, you don't know if you need to give bicyclists longer greens or not. So one more highlighting this scenario. Again, this is a 92-foot traverse from the bottom left to the top right. We have two bicyclists that are going to enter the box, traveling at different speeds from the same starting location. that first bicyclist clears in 9.1 seconds, and the second actually clears in exactly 12.7, right at the median or the norm for the MUTCD. So all those scenarios, that was really efficiency. So we've maintained safety, but I've showed you the impact on efficiency. I want to come back to this other video where there was a bicyclist turning left. So just below my label, this is a left turn of 93 feet requiring 12.7 seconds according to the MUTCD. This bicyclist is in between traffic and in cars. When the light turns green, there's startup loss. He starts his motion, he's executing a left turn, so we follow him through the intersection. In this scenario, that bicyclist took 16.2 seconds to make the clearance. So that's 28% longer than the MUTCD, meaning that theoretically, by those rules, he wouldn't be safe. So right now, the California MUTCD says that we only need 12.7 seconds, but we can remember a time not too many years ago when pedestrians used to walk faster as well. So in this scenario, we can actually serve a longer green time for people who need it and a shorter green time for people who don't need it. So that's how our bikes in the box or the box operates for GridSmart. Because of that technology, there's a couple other benefits that come your way with that feature. If you have the Performance or Performance Plus module, we now have bike-specific counting, and that's described in the FAQ and in the change log. So even if you're not using the box for bike extensions, like you can for the Performance Plus module, you're going to get improved bike counting in the Performance module because of this technology. Additionally, we're better at detecting, we've always detected and tracked bikes, but it's been improved significantly in very low contrast scenarios. And that's true whether or not you're using the Performance or Performance Plus module. That's a base detection feature. So we've also tried to anticipate frequently asked questions, and there's quite a few of those, 12 or 13 or so, that are on the support site right now. And I encourage you to take a look at those. Just to highlight a couple of them, the bikes in the box also activate vehicle extension outputs if you have them on. And the answer to that is yes. A bicycle is considered to be a subset of vehicles. So if you set up bike and vehicle outputs in the box, the bike will activate both of those outputs. What kind of bike reporting is available? And I covered that a moment ago about the improved length-based classification. There is a specific length of 6 feet for bicycles, and vehicles begin at 11 feet. So you can do a length-based classification and do a specific bicycle count. And I should note that that's for bicyclists exiting stop line zones. How does GridSmart discriminate bicyclists? It's a machine learning approach. Technically, it's a deep convolutional neural network that's based on image characteristics. The other question is, how can the box be drawn to cover crosswalks? At present, no. This is specifically about bikes and vulnerable road users that might be in the box. This is not for pedestrian zones as of yet. So I encourage you, like I said, that's just a few of the highlights of the FAQs, and I'm sure you guys might come up with some other questions. But on support.gridsmart.com, we've already drafted a box FAQ and answered some of those questions. You might ask about what we're planning in the future with improvements to this technology. Well, you can probably start to imagine where we might go with this. Obviously, improvements, new features, and new functionality, all related to bikes and other vulnerable road users. Now, that being said, and this is represented in the FAQ, GridSmart is committed to relentless improvement. We're rolling this feature out. We think it's very good. We think it's the best in the industry. We don't think it's perfect, and we want to make it perfect. So, you know, we're going to rely on you. We're looking for your feedback for where, how you would like to see things work in the future. Your feedback if you see something we don't expect. We encourage you to use your sales manager, your field application engineer, and also I will note that there's a feature request form at support.gridsmart.com where we take community input. So all of those avenues are open to you, and we strongly encourage you to provide feedback. This is a new way of doing this. We're not trying to put any stringent requirements on how you implement it. So we're really excited about hearing what you do and hearing your feedback with the way this behaves. So that's how Bikes in the Box work. It's really not that hard to explain. We draw the zone, set up the outputs. Whenever there's a bike, we turn on those outputs. What you want to do in the controller, again, that's up to you, and that's up to your controller manufacturer. And that's how Bikes in the Box work. With that, I want to shift gears just a little bit to wrap up today. And the reason why I want to discuss this is I'm not going to get too deep into it. There's going to be a future webinar that goes a little bit deeper, but we've changed a little bit about how you configure a GS2 with 19.3. And specifically, I'm going to refer to this as device configuration. And one of the things you've probably encountered if you've set up many GridSmart processors is that there's kind of two parts, right? There's the intersection and how you want to detect and track vehicles, where you want zones, and how it interfaces with the controller, what the outputs are. And then there's also the device itself. And the device is about the network, the NTP, date, time, etc. And we're separating those two concerns. And we're doing that with some benefits for you as our users and customers. So to sort of bring attention to it, if you're using a 6.9 processor or earlier, and you go to edit the site settings, you may be familiar with this panel that has several tabs. On the left is the network tab. On the right is the date time tab. And in the date time tab, there were NTP settings. Now, when you upgrade to 19.3 and beyond, and you go to the GridSmart client, that panel will look like this, and you will notice there is no network tab, and the date time does not have the NTP server in it. So how do you set that up? And that's what this will show you. It's a browser-based device configuration now. So you would navigate generally on your in your lab bench. You would use your laptop and you would navigate to the device. You can log in now to the device. And in this scenario, I'm going to log in as a publish user with the default published password. When I sign in, I can actually see any configured cameras that might be attached, and I can look at some diagnostics. So note I logged in with a publish password, publish credentials. There are no changes I can make here because this is an administrative function. So I can get quite a bit of advanced diagnostics, I can get logs, etc., but I can't really do anything. So let's switch to an admin view. So I'll log out with publish, and I'm gonna log in with the admin and the admin credentials and default admin password. Please change the default admin password. So now we can see the cameras and then quite a few more menu options on the left. And in particular, there are modules. We can choose a new license. We can upload a license file or sync one from the cloud. We can add users, change passwords. Again, you should always change the default admin password. The location settings are here, and I'll return to what that means in a minute. The date, time, etc. And in terms of the network, this is where the network settings are. And that first tab that says network, traditionally these ship with DHCP, but if you want to use a static IP, this is where you would set that up, and this is where you would put in the NTP server. So this is the same page basically that was in the GridSmart client before. Now, I wanted to return to this concept about location. So you can actually do this on your bench in the lab, back in the shop. You can program in the location. You can set up all the network information, NTP server, static IP addresses, and all of those things without ever connecting a camera. So if you put in an IO module, you're going to take it to a TS2 cabinet, you put in a TS2 module, and you can do this all in the lab. You can set up the location, the network, the date, time, all before taking it to the field. So this is something our customers have been asking for a long time is, can we do the basic setup without having a camera? And the answer to that is yes, now you can. And you can actually do it without even having the GridSmart client. And the next thing I want to note with this device-based configuration, which won't have an impact right now with 19.3, but it will with our next release, is that the system operations panel has a way to push an update to this processor. So you have a connection to the processor. You can select an update file. And if you've downloaded an update stick from us before, and there's an update folder that has a binary file, a bin file, you can send that update file. You'll get a warning letting you know you're about to update a processor remotely. And then you can continue on, and you can update that processor from your office without creating a USB stick. So that, of course, you can't update a 6.9 processor that way because this isn't running on it yet. But the next release past 19.3, you will have that capability. So that's a little bit of an intro for the device-based configuration. And again, there's going to be a subsequent webinar later this month, I believe, where our software engineering leadership is going to dig into everything in there, because a lot of what's going on is about networking and IT in order to bring us up to speed with enterprise security standards. And that really concludes what I wanted to say about 19.3 today. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to me. And with that, I think we could take some questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you everyone for attending today. As Jeff said, we're opening the floor up for questions. This time we'll be doing it a little bit differently. So if you could submit your written question in the Zoom webinar chat, that'll allow us to see those questions better, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. We also just sent a message out, so you should get a notification of where to type in your questions. And looks like we just got a question in. So Jeff, I'll let you take those.
Sure. So the question, we got two questions that came in. We'll start with the first one. The IP to get to the web UI still the 192.168.150.10. Yes, that's correct. If you're connected to, and that by the way is in the changelog. It's one of the early bullets. If you're connected directly to the processor with your laptop, it is 192.168.150.10. However, I will note that it is HTTPS. It's a secure socket, not HTTP, and it's over a different port, 8900. But again, that is documented as one of the early bullets in the changelog. And then we have a second question: is why is it called 19.3 and not 7.0? We'd been putting this in the changelog for a little while to note that this change was coming. The betas for this release started in March of 2019. This is hence the 19.3 release. The next version of the software we believe we will be running betas of in June, but we're expecting it to roll out after June. So what we're seeing is these are going to be year month releases. So year.month, and then if there are any patches above those, they'll have a third number. So the another question we had is, what about scooters? So this release is focused on bicycles. We have limited data on scooters where we believe we do a good job with that, but the product is about bicyclists. Other vulnerable road users are captured largely. We will believe we will be calling that a feature in the future, but it remains to be developed to the fullest, but it works pretty well for most vulnerable road users. But this is about bicyclists. Someone asked about a subscription service for this feature. There's no subscription service that GridSmart sells. This is just the Performance Plus module, which actually the majority of our users have on their GS2s. Another question: does it differentiate between bicycles and motorcycles? Again, this is one of the things that we predicted would be a frequently asked question. And between bicycles and motorcycles, it does a pretty good job, but it's not perfect. So sometimes a motorcycle will be counted as a bicycle. Sometimes a motorcycle will trigger an extension. The great thing is if it's in the box and it's an extension, it's traveling quite fast and gets through quickly and has limited impact on the operation of the intersection. And that's being done by a combination of machine learning, so what it can see in the image, and other characteristics of the tracking. Let's see. There's a question also about how this webinar was specifically about bicyclists, more information about security improvements. There is an update coming to the user guide that's going to have a networking guide in the back. And the webinar a little later this month is going to specifically address the security improvements. Let me see if I'm trying to get these questions. Legacy processors. I believe you should have received emails from our CEO on this front. This update does not support the legacy processors. There will be no official software updates for legacy processors going forward. Let's see. Is it a requirement to set the network up before going to the field? No, it's not a requirement. It's just an option. And how accurate are the counts with bikes and clusters? Pretty good. If we get two bicyclists traveling close together, we're going to offering to generate one count. So as I mentioned also, we're counting based on bikes exiting stop line zones. So we're using the box to discriminate it as a bicyclist, but we're counting based on what stop line zone they exited and where they went. We will be using this feature to improve the counting significantly in the future. So I believe we'll do very well even with clustered bikes. Bikes with bike trailers will still be recognized as a vulnerable road user. And if it's a bike, it'll still be counted as 6 feet, even with a tag along. We're not discriminating those from other bikes at present. There's a question about the legacy processor. There is a upgrade program for legacy processors. I don't have the details in front of me, but I know that's been communicated to our distributors and to our sales team. So please reach out to your representative on that. Now, let me see if I'm missing anything here. Okay, let me step over into these other ones. Bike counts be added to existing reports. Someone asked, will bike counts be added to existing reports, or will they need to be separately reported? So right now they're actually integrated into the length-based classification. And if you take a look at the FAQ on how we did that, a bicyclist will be 6 feet long, and is the only object that'll be 6 feet long. Everything that's not a bicyclist will start at 11 feet. And that bin is based on our length-based classification was always plus and minus three feet anyway. So an 11-foot is a sort of the minimum vehicle size bin that really is plus or minus 3 feet, and a bicyclist is 6 feet. So the default bins that are set up when you run a length-based classification, that lowest length is only bicyclist now, and it should be much more accurate than it was in the past. Someone said, do you assign box outputs to all phases in use? That is entirely up to you. So you can assign as many outputs to the box as you would like. So if you want to trigger extensions on only 2 through movements, then you would only need to put perhaps two outputs. If you wanted to trigger extensions for all 8 phases, you could actually do that as well. Let's see if there's another question. Where we go here. Someone asked if the hardware for legacy processors will still be supported. I'm not sure if they mean, will the software, this software will not install on legacy processors. It uses functionality beyond what those are capable of supporting. If you still have running, there's a trade-up program for GS2s that we're supporting. All of the legacy processors, I believe the last ones came out of warranty about 3 months ago. If you still have an operating intersection and you're still having, if you encounter some issues, we will, we will look at that on a case-by-case basis in terms of software patches, but there will be no more official releases that will support legacy processors. And the last question, someone was asking about pedestrian zones. So we also have the pedestrian module. There used to be a separate pedestrian module. We have pedestrian zones. That functionality is included in the Performance Plus module. And the intent for the pedestrian zones was also safety and extensions. We know of some organizations that have maintained the faster walk speed for their walk signal, and then used extensions to extend the adjacent phase, even when the walk signal stopped showing, to account for slower moving pedestrians. That was the intent of our pedestrian zones. The technology that's based on is not the same technology as this, but it will be in the future to improve those pedestrian zones. All right. And I think someone was asking a question about the admin and the passwords. The default passwords are going to be documented in your user guide. And again, this doesn't impact the legacy processor, the LPs, at all. The software won't run on those. In terms of default passwords, consult the user guide, and best security practices is obviously to have an administrator with an administrator password and to set up user accounts for that. We're not forcing you to make any changes beyond what you've already been doing, but we can now support those things when they are required. So I think that was a flurry of questions. So someone says, can pedestrian zones be set up without marked crosswalks? Yes, they probably could. Again, GridSmart is very transparent. Pedestrian zones are based on they err on the side of safety as well. So with any type of moving objects in or near a pedestrian zone that's not associated definitely with a vehicle, it's likely to trigger a false activation. And that's one of the things we're talking about, bringing this technology to bear on the pedestrian zones to improve their performance as well. But yes, you can set up a pedestrian zone even without a marked crosswalk. All right, well, I think that is everything I'm going to cover today. I really, again, want to thank everyone for participating, and Brooke, I'll let you close it out.
Thank you, Jeff. If your questions were not answered today, please feel free to reach out to us at support@gridsmart.com, and we'll make sure we get a timely response to you. This webinar was also recorded, so we will be uploading it to our YouTube account, and we will send you a link to that recording once it's live, so you can watch it if you didn't get to see the beginning of the webinar, and so you can, of course, share it with all your colleagues. Thank you again, everyone.